Snow drifts through the cracked shutters of a one-room hut. Smoke rises weakly from damp wood. A child lies awake on rotting straw, ribs sharp beneath torn linen. His mother mutters a prayer into a cold pot that will not boil. Outside, the wind carries rumors of the plague creeping closer. A black promise wrapped in coughs and crows. Asterisk, when the soldiers arrive, no one resists. Iron boots crush brittle snow. Dogs snarl at thin legs. The boy tries to hide under a fur that stinks of wet sheep. A rough hand finds him anyway, drags him into the gray dawn. Behind him, his mother's cry breaks through the wind, but fades quickly when a gaunt priest in a black hood steps forward. He murmurs that the king's mercy is greater than hunger. Her boy will serve the realm, he says. She does not argue. The priest drops a copper coin in the snow. It disappears under a bootprint. Asterisk in the castle's courtyard. The boy blinks at stone towers, scraping the clouds. He's shoved into a line of villagers, some too old to work, some too young to fight. A steward with pale eyes inspects each one, tapping his stick when he wants them taken inside or away. When the stick reaches the boy's face, it pauses. The steward squints, then bows quickly as the king appears behind him. Asterisk, King Nero stands, swaddled in furs, a black veil draped over his shoulder. He stares at the child's wide eyes. Something unspoken hangs between the king and the boy's hollow cheeks. The same narrow nose, the same ghost of someone who once slept in silk sheets and bled out under a leech's knife. The priest at the king's elbow leans in, breathes a single word. Divine sign. Asterisk servants whisper that Lady Aurelia's spirit wanders the highest tower. They say she wails at dawn, scratching at the windows for her lost husband. Neronius has spent 6 winters alone, kneeling before relics that do not speak back. Now the boy's face breaks him open like old bread. He steps closer, brushes dirty hair from a smudged forehead. For a moment, the boy sees tears caught in the king's beard. The steward turns away, pretending not to watch. Asterisk by nightfall, the boy is no longer among the villagers. He's washed in freezing water by 2 silent maids who scrape grime from his skin with blunt knives. His hair is hacked away with sheep shears. He bites his tongue when they scrub between his legs with wine-soaked cloths. Naked, he's forced to kneel before an altar where wax drips onto cold stone. The priest mutters prayers over him, sprinkles salt into his open palms. He flinches, but does not move. Asterisk after the prayers, they bind his wrists and lead him down torchlit corridors. Iron hinges grown open into a cramped chamber that reeks of stale herbs and burned linen. A man in a leather apron waits by a low table stained black at the corners. He does not speak, only gestures for the boy to lie down. A monk holds him still, murmuring that pain cleanses sin. The boy tries to fix his eyes on a beam above, where cobwebs sway like thin ghosts. The surgeon works quickly, ignoring muffled cries that die against a priest's robe pressed to the boy's mouth. Asterisk, when it's done, he does not stand. He drifts in and out, visions of his mother's pot bubbling somewhere far away. His legs ache with an emptiness he cannot name. They carry him half-wrapped in linens, through a door carved with holy symbols. He's laid in a chamber heavy with rose oil and candle smoke. Silk sheets swallow him. He wants to run, but his body will not listen. Asterisk at dawn, the king enters alone. Neronius's steps are soft, but the boy feels each one in his chest. He tries to sit, but the king hushes him, pressing a warm hand to his cheek. No words at first, just the hush of silk on silk as the king sinks beside him. Fingers trace his jaw, his ear, his throat. The boy shivers, though the fire roars nearby. Neronius calls him Aurelia. The boy tries to correct him, but the king's finger stills his lips. Aurelia, he says again, softer this time, like a prayer that might stick to the rafters, if whispered, right? Asterisk outside the chamber. The castle wakes with 100 footsteps, guards barking orders. maids hauling buckets, horses stamping in the frost. Inside, there is only silence and the rustle of fine cloth, as the boy is dressed in garments that belong to bones, now buried beneath the royal crypt. His hands tremble in laced cuffs. A maid fastens a necklace around his neck, a circle of tarnished gold that once graced Lady Aurelia's throat. The weight drags at his collarbone. Days blur together. He learns not to speak unless spoken to. He learns to bow his head when the king's voice cracks. He learns that if he weeps, the priest calls it a blessing, proof that the queen's spirit moves through him. The king's grief soaks the boy's new name until he almost forgets the sound of the old one. When he tries to mouth it at night, the syllables feel foreign, like words in a language no one here will ever hear again. The kitchen girls gossip about his eyes, say they shine like moonlit water, just like hers did before fever took her. An old nurse fingers a lock of his hair, whispering she combed Aurelia's hair the same way on her wedding night. The boy flinches but says nothing. To speak would be to remind them he is not her. To speak would invite punishment. One dawn. He catches his reflection in a polished plate. The hair is trimmed smooth, the clothes fit poorly, but they are hers. His face stares back, or hers does. He lifts a hand to touch his lips, wonders if the dead queen's ghost looks out through his eyes. Somewhere beneath silk and stale perfume, a cold pit opens in his gut. If he speaks his real name, will she hear it too? Will she be angry? Will the king? That night, Neronius visits again, drunk on warm wine and half-muttered prayers. He cradles the boy's head as if it were a reliquary, fragile, holy, brimming with answers. The boy closes his eyes. If he pretends hard enough, he can almost feel the hut's dirt floor beneath his knees, his mother's coarse shawl around his shoulders. He holds that memory as long as he can. But when the king sighs Aurelia into his hair, the boy lets the memory slip. In this place, memories do not feed the hungry. They only starve what little self he has left. When Neronius sleeps, the boy lies awake. Candlelight dances on the chamber walls, casting shadows that stretch like bony hands. In that flickering dark, the boy understands fully what he is now, a vessel, a relic, a puppet carved in the shape of a woman who will never return. Whatever name his mother gave him has no power here. He turns his face to the wall, eyes dry, mouth shut. Beyond, the heavy doors, the wind moans through stone corridors. It carries the old name away, piece by piece, into the black winter. The heavy wooden door groans every dawn as the maid slips in, arms full of pale linen and stale bread. He sits up before she speaks, hands folded the way the monk taught him. One cracked bowl of broth, a heel of hard cheese, sometimes a bruised pear if the kitchens haven't hidden it first. He chews slowly, careful not to stain the lace at his throat. Anything that touches the silk must be washed in rose water. Anything ruined is paid for in kneeling prayers, until his knees swell and split. The king's tailor hovers each morning, smoothing fabric over narrow shoulders, pinning loose seams. He tries not to flinch when cold fingers brush his collarbone. Each day the garments change, velvets, brocades, fur-lined cloaks cut to a shape that never belonged to him. He stands in silence as they fuss, turning him this way and that, like a doll at market. He listens for the hush of footsteps that mean the king is near. If the king enters, he must bow low enough that his hair brushes the marble floor. When he's not summoned to the great hall, he's confined to the queen's old chamber. Outside the windows, crows wheel above frozen gardens. Inside, he is taught how to sit at a harpsichord, though his fingers are clumsy from frost. A matron with a voice like a blade drills him on reading psalms aloud, voice soft but clear, exactly how Lady Aurelia once recited them at the king's side. He repeats each line until his throat burns. When he stumbles, the matron raps his knuckles with a thin rod. He learns quickly that tears invite only longer lessons, In the evenings, the priest appears. He smells of old books and incense. He calls the boy by the dead queen's name, each syllable heavy with false sweetness. Together they kneel on cold flagstones, repeating prayers for the king's soul, for the safety of the realm, for the queen's spirit to rest. Sometimes the priest's words drift into dark promises about sin and rot, and how this fragile body must carry all that sorrow so the king does not drown in it. The boy nods when he's meant to nod, bows when he's meant to bow. He tries not to think about the stories the old cook whispered about monks and secrets, and scenes hidden behind holy doors. When the king calls for him, servants lead him down echoing passages. Torches flicker on damp stone. He hears every scratch of rats in the walls, every hiss of wind through cracked mortar. The guards stand aside, helmets hiding eyes that never meet his. He wonders if they see him as the queen or the ghost, or just another unlucky captive caught in the king's grief. Each night at the king's feet, he pretends to be grateful. He pours wine, fingers trembling so the cup does not spill. He hums lullabies he does not know the words to, only the tune. The king rests his head in the boy's lap and murmurs broken things he cannot answer. He smells of sweat and sweet wine, and dead flowers. The boy keeps his eyes fixed on the far wall, where candlelight dances like tiny souls desperate to escape thy day. Rumors coil through the halls like smoke. Servants whisper that plague eats through the nearest villages. Travelers arrive at the gates and vanish into quarantine sheds where fires burn day and night. Sometimes the guards carry out black bundles before dawn and bury them in shallow earth beyond the orchard. The kitchen boys say the orchard fruit tastes sweeter for the rot beneath it. He bites down his hunger when they say such things, grateful when Marta, the old kitchen drudge, slips him bits of dried meat wrapped in rags. Marta says nothing about the king. She only pats his shoulder with hands rough as tree bark, and leaves before the guards come looking. Each evening, Marta's kindness means he has enough strength to rise when the monk summons him for penance. In the small hours, he is made to wash the queen's old sheets by hand in icy water until his skin splits. He scrubs at invisible stains until the priest nods and blesses the fabric with bitter herbs. He does not ask why silk that never touches his bare skin must be purified again and again. He does not ask why the monk lingers to watch. Questions are for people who still believe there are answers worth hearing. In the kitchens, boys and girls too young to serve at table drag sacks of grain across stone floors, slick with spilled broth and rat droppings. He sees them when they think no one watches, pale shadows slipping scraps into hidden pockets, eyes darting toward the door. If the steward catches them, they vanish for a night or a week. When they return, they limp or do not speak at all. He learns to share when Marta passes him extra crusts. Sometimes he presses a piece into a scullion's hand, whispering that saints do not care who eats as long as someone lives. He tells himself that's true. When the fever flares through the barracks, he hears the coughing echo even through the thick walls of the queen's chamber. Guards wrap strips of cloth over mouth and nose. The matron who beat his knuckles does not come for days. When she returns, her eyes are sunken, breath thick with vinegar and cloves. She does not strike him when he fumbles his psalms. Instead, she sits behind him, her sighs louder than his voice. In his sleep, he dreams of cold fields and black soil. He dreams of his mother's hands pressing mud over seeds, of a fire that would not catch in a winter when wolves circled the hut and took the weakest lambs first. When he wakes, there is only silk under his palms and the taste of iron on his tongue. When the king does not come for days, the boy feels something like relief, but knows it is dangerous to name it. He knows from Marta that the king's sadness curdles into cruelty when left alone too long. So he waits, still as a grave marker, while the priest hovers like a crow, picking at scraps of flesh. He dreams of escape, but never of freedom. Freedom is a word that rots on the tongue faster than stale bread. Some nights, The mute guard Berthold stands outside his door. He never speaks. Once, when the priest was late, Berthold slipped him a strip of dried apple and pressed a finger to his lips. In that silence, the boy felt the warm press of a secret that was not another man's grief or a dead woman's memory. Berthold never did it again. They caught Marta smuggling scraps from the larder 2 nights later. Her back bled through her dress as she scrubbed the scullery floor on hands and knees. He wanted to ask what mercy tastes like but could not make. The words moved past his teeth. When storms lash the ramparts, the windows rattle so hard he fears the glass will break. In the cold, his thin body curls into the queen's old furs, careful not to stain them with sweat. He listens for footsteps. That mean the king has come to drag him from warmth into memory. Sometimes they do not come. Sometimes the king stays away for nights on end, drunk on prayers whispered by trembling monks, who promise him heaven if he keeps the ghost alive. He counts the days by how many candles burn to stumps. He marks them in his mind, because there is no paper for him, no ink, no record that says he is anything but Aurelia reborn. The steward's ledger holds names for guards, kitchen scullions, washerwomen. His name is an echo sewn into old gowns and bedsheets that do not warm him. He wonders if the fleas that bite his ankles care whose blood they drink. Perhaps they are the only creatures in the castle who see him as what he was, not what he must pretend to be. When Marta's cracked voice hisses at him through the kitchen door, she tells him there is no mercy in stone walls. There is only obedience. If he must live, he must hold silence tighter than hunger. When she squeezes his hand, he wants to ask what his mother's name was when she cried out for him that night in the snow. But he only nods. Her fingers tremble when they pull away. In the hush of dawn, he stands by the narrow window, breath misting the glass. Far below, plague fires burn like small suns against the black earth. Smoke curls skyward, carrying whispers of the dead too, whatever God listens. He touches the cold pain and tries to imagine what freedom might taste like if he ever remembered how to speak it. But the word slips away before it reaches his tongue, lost behind locked doors and linen stiff with prayers. The coughing starts in the lower quarters and crawls upward like mold on damp walls. Servants vanish from corridors overnight. He hears whispers that the monk is dead, the steward's daughter too. No one lights the candles in the chapel anymore. The priest mutters that the queen's spirit is restless, that the living must suffer to keep her calm. When he kneels in front of the altar, cold stone biting his knees raw, he tries to picture the queen's face separate from his own. It slips away the harder he tries. Marta does not come anymore. Berthold is gone too. A new guard stands watch, eyes flat as pond water, sword always in hand. He knows better than to ask where the others went. He listens instead to the rustle of rats in the ceiling, the scrape of dry coughs through the stone. One night, fever dreams coil around him, so real he tries to stand and nearly cracks his skull on the bedpost. He sees a woman's face in the shadows. For a moment he thinks it is his mother, but the crown of pearls at her brow reminds him what he truly is. When the king finally appears again, he reeks of wine and ash. He doesn't say Aurelia at first. He just sits on the edge of the bed, staring at him like he's trying to see through skin to bone to whatever ghost he thinks might still be hiding there. Fingers cold and rough grip his jaw, tilting his head side to side. He tries not to flinch when the king whispers that his hair has grown too long, too coarse, not right. He wants to say it isn't his hair, it never was, but the words choke him. The king leaves without touching him again that night, and that silence feels heavier than any hands. By morning, the matron returns with the shears. She saws through tangled strands until they fall like wet rope onto the stone floor. A bowl of cold water waits to rinse the cut edges. He stares at the ripples, searching for the child who once hid beneath a fur in a smoke-choked hut. He finds nothing but hollow eyes that do not blink back. A sickness creeps through the castle. Fires burn in the courtyard day and night, smoke thick with herbs meant to keep death outside. The guards carry buckets of vinegar to scrub the stones where blood spatters darken the cracks. He watches from the window, numb to the shouting and the tolling of bells that never seem to stop. The king locks himself away for days at a time. The priest says the queen is angry. The boy tries to remember if the queen ever spoke to him in dreams, but the only voice he knows is his own, buried under a name he never chose. One evening they drag him to the great hall. His legs tremble as he crosses the cold floor. The king stands on the dais, wild eyes rimmed red, beard dripping wine. The priest whispers in his ear, lips curling around words that echo through the high rafters. The king points at the boy, voice cracking with rage that tastes of stale prayers. He shouts that the ghost is fading, that the boy's eyes have grown dull, that the dead queen is slipping away. Servants watch from the shadows, backs pressed to stone, afraid to breathe too loud. He tries to answer, but the priest's hand clamps down on his shoulder, forcing him to his knees. The king demands a sign proof that the spirit still lives in this fragile flesh. The priest orders him to speak the prayers he's mouthed 1,000 times, but the words tangle in his throat. He can feel the room watching, waiting for the miracle that will never come. The king steps down from the dais, grabs his chin so hard he tastes blood where teeth pierce his tongue. He forces the boy's gaze up to his. The king's voice is soft now, broken. He pleads for Aurelia to return, to smile, to forgive him. The boy wants to tell him he is not her. Instead, he opens his mouth and whispers the old psalms, hoping the sound will be enough to stop the king's trembling hands. It is not enough. A backhand cracks his jaw sideways. The hall falls silent, except for the ragged echo of his own breath. A guard drags him to the chapel. The priest mutters penance. A lash bites his back once for each word. He failed to speak clearly. When they finish, they leave him there, curled on the cold stone beneath flickering candles. He tries not to cry out. He knows the walls are thin and hungry for secrets. In the weeks that follow, the king's rage settles into something worse. Cold distance. Doors stay locked from the outside. Meals shrink to stale crusts and watered wine. The matron returns but says nothing as she forces him to bathe in vinegar. She pinches his cheeks to see if any color remains. She murmurs that the spirit is fickle. He knows what she means, but does not care. Each night he wraps himself in sheets. That smell of mildew, counting heartbeats to prove he still exists beneath the ghost. Rumors slip under doors like drafts. Peasants dying in the fields, bodies left for crows. Bandits at the border, priests burning records to hide how many have vanished. He thinks of the village where he was born, the cracked hut, the iron boots in the snow. If the plague took them all, maybe it was mercy. Here, mercy rots before it reaches the tongue. One night, the king returns, breath sour, hair tangled. He drags the boy upright by his collar. Calls him Aurelia again, voice dripping venom now, instead of grief. He accuses the boy of hiding her, of burying her spirit under filth and sickness. His fingers bruise the boy's throat as he demands an answer. The boy wants to scream that he is not her, was never her, but he bites his lip instead. Blood spills onto silk. The king lets him fall, spitting that maybe the monks were wrong to save him at all. When he wakes, the priest waits beside the bed. He speaks of cleansing, of trials, of how the body must suffer to free what is holy. He says the king demands proof that the queen still breathes through him. They strip him of silk and lace and lock him in the stone cell beneath the chapel. Straw litters the floor, damp with mold. Chains rattle where they bolt his ankle to the wall. The priest leaves a bowl of water that tastes of iron and dirt. He drinks anyway. Nights blur. Hunger gnaws deeper than the wounds on his back. He hums old lullabies to keep the shadows at bay. He dreams of the hut, but the door never opens. His mother's face dissolves each time he reaches for it. Sometimes he thinks he hears Marta's voice, Berthold's silence, The soft prayers the matron forced through cracked lips. They drift through the stones, taunting him with memories that mean nothing here. One morning, the priest returns, with a brazier of burning herbs. Smoke chokes the stale air. He mutters incantations meant to drive out rot, to prove the queen's soul still clings to this cage of skin and bone. He sprinkles salt across bruises that never heal. The boy no longer flinches. He closes his eyes, and lets the smoke curl around his ribs like a blanket. Maybe if he breathes deep enough, the ghost will finally rise from him and leave only bone for the rats. When the king comes again, he does not speak. He stands in the doorway, ringed in flickering torchlight. The boy lifts his head, expecting another blow, another demand, to say the words he no longer remembers, but the king only stares through him, as if he's already gone. Something inside the boy cracks then, a splinter buried too deep to mend. He understands at last that the ghost is not meant to leave. It will be ground into him until nothing remains but silence. When the king turns away, the priest whispers that penance must continue, that the boy must prove he is empty enough for the dead to live again. He nods, because refusing means nothing now. Somewhere in the walls, the coughing still echoes, a lullaby for those waiting their turn to vanish. He tastes rust on his tongue and wonders how many more prayers it will take to disappear completely. The last of the candles burns to a stub in the cracked wall, leaving the damp stone to swallow what's left of the light. He sits with his back pressed to the chains, counting each heartbeat by the drip of water through the ceiling above. No one comes to feed him now. A servant slides a bowl through the slit once a day, sometimes twice, when the king remembers. The broth tastes of bone and rot. He eats it anyway, because hunger is the only proof he is still here. The priest's footsteps echo less often. When they do, he brings holy words that sound stale, as though the walls themselves have grown tired of carrying them. He tells the boy that penance must go on until the king sees her again. Aurelia's gentle smile behind hollow eyes. The boy listens in silence, because the words no longer stick. Each syllable slides past him, dissolving into the chill that gnaws at his skin. When the priest leaves, he tries to remember his mother's voice, but it has blurred into the rustle of rats in chains. Outside the door, a guard coughs so hard he spits blood on the stones. He hears it through the crack under the door, the wet rasp, the muffled curse. More than once he wonders if the plague will find its way to this cell and end what no man here has the will to finish. But disease has mercy and cruelty in equal measure. It drifts past him for now, feeding on the strong first and leaving scraps for the forgotten. Sometimes he dreams he stands in the orchard where the dead lie buried, shallow graves under fruit trees, heavy with blight. In that dream, he digs with his hands until his nails split, unearthing bones that still wear rings and scraps of silk. Each skull he lifts wears a crown of weeds. Each hollow socket looks back at him like a mirror. When he wakes, his fingers are raw where he scraped them against the wall in sleep. Rumors slip in through the guards' muttered prayers. The king grows thinner by the day, locked away in a wing of the castle no servant dares enter. Some say he sleeps beside the queen's tomb, curled around a stone that never answers. Some say he whispers to shadows that carry her laughter back to him. The boy wonders if the king remembers the name of the child stolen from a hut buried in snow so many winters ago. If he does, he never spoke it aloud. One dusk, the priest comes with 2 monks. They unlock the chains, drag him to the chapel above, where the air reeks of incense and mold. He stumbles, bones brittle from nights without warmth. They hold him before the altar, where the king kneels, hands clasped around a relic that glitters under flickering candlelight. The king does not look at him at first. He whispers into the marble floor, as if the dead queen lies just beneath, waiting to crawl out and wear his skin like a cloak. When the king lifts his gaze, his eyes are wet, rimmed red from sleepless nights. He reaches for the boy's face, thumb brushing the bruise at his temple that never faded. He calls him Aurelia once more, softer now, as though saying it gently might make the lie true. He asks if she forgives him. The boy does not answer because there is nothing left to answer with. His tongue is a slab of stone in his mouth, heavy with words that never belonged to him. The priest orders him to kneel and kiss the relic. The metal chills his lips, tastes of rust and stale incense. The king murmurs a blessing that unravels into sobs. When the last candle gutters out, they drag him back to the cell, whispering prayers over his bowed head. The door slams shut behind him, the lock grinding like teeth. He presses his ear to the wood and listens for footsteps. There is only silence. Days pass without count. He no longer knows which hour is dawn or dusk. The priest stops coming. Food stops too. He licks moisture from the walls when thirst burns, deeper than hunger. He dreams of snow that never melts, of wolves howling beyond splintered doors, of a woman's hand pushing him behind sacks of grain to keep him hidden when soldiers came with torches. He wonders if she knew this was better than fire. One night, a scullion's whisper drifts through the door. A girl too young to carry more than a bucket presses a crust through the crack. Her breath hitches when she sees the bruises, the bones, pushing through skin. She does not speak his name. She does not know it. She only knows the ghost he wears like a mask. When she leaves, her footsteps fade so quickly he wonders if she was ever really there, far above. Bells toll again. Not for prayer, but for the dead. He imagines the courtyard piled high with plague bodies, cloth soaked in pitch to keep the smell at bay. He wonders if he will be carried out that way, wrapped in the queen's old sheets, mistaken for something holy when there is nothing left but bone. He drifts in and out of waking. Sometimes he thinks Marta stands over him, her cracked hands brushing sweat from his brow. Sometimes he feels Berthold's silence like a warm shield between him and the darkness. But when he opens his eyes, there is only the wall and the black mold creeping through the mortar at the edge of his mind. He tries to gather pieces of the boy he once was. A name, his mother whispered, when the frost cracked the roof beams. The soft hush of lambs in the pen before the soldiers came. The taste of stolen berries that stained his fingers purple when the harvest failed. Each memory slips through him like smoke through rotten thatch. In the end, he does not feel death arrive. It does not roar through the door or sweep him into holy light. It comes like sleep after too many nights awake, soft and heavy and merciful. He feels his bones sink into straw, breath rattling like the last ember in a hearth gone cold. He thinks he hears voices beyond the door, the scullion's whisper, the priest's droning chant, the king's broken sob, but they blur into the stone, swallowed by walls that have heard too many secrets to remember one more. When they find him, days later, they do not lift him with care. They strip the cell of rags and drag him up narrow stairs that echo with the scrape of boots and the clatter of iron. No prayers follow him out. No candles burn for the ghost the king tried to keep alive. They wrap him in linen, stiff with old wine stains, and lower him into the pit behind the orchard. Soil falls on silk that once touched a dead queen's throat. No stone bears his name. No record marks the child stolen and broken to fill the hollow ache of a king's grief. The orchard grows thick that year. Fruit sags heavy on boughs above shallow graves. Children sneak through the trees to steal apples, sweetened by what lies beneath. They do not know who sleeps there. They do not care. In the great hall, the king sits alone, hands clutching a relic that no longer whispers. The priest writes a new sermon, weaving tales of a queen who never left, a ghost that lingered long enough to cleanse the realm of sin. Behind closed doors, the monks scrub parchment clean, leaving no line for the boy whose body fed the roots. In another winter, snow buries the orchard. Wolves prowl the edge of the woods. Somewhere in the hush of the falling flakes, the story fades from mouths too hungry to speak it. He becomes another shadow swallowed by plague and famine, another echo lost in stone, and the castle, thick with secrets, holds its silence tight, feeding its walls with memory until memory rots too.